Statement of London Packard. There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed. That's Franklin's Trench. It was once my home, though through all the disfigured metal you can't recognize a utopia in which I and 50 or so others once lived. I was born into a bleak and uncaring black and white world, and it was only in my young adulthood that color flowed into it. You cannot understand it now, but in the late 1960s it was possible to imagine that society was awakening, that there could be a time with no possessions, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. I lived wherever the ground was soft and the company sweet, moving from place to place, working with my hands while I wrote my poetry and played my songs of love and loss. One bright, sunshine-filled day in 1975, I was strolling through the city of brotherly love when I stumbled across Franklin's Trench. It was heaven. It had good cover, warmth from steam vents for the cold nights, a bit of soil for growing basics in summertime, and even clean water. I never advertised Franklin's Trench, but in the 27 solar years that we had our home, over 1,500 souls sojourned with us. Even Tatum Zilius's kind mother lived with us for a month or two. We never imagined that this bright-eyed kid with her would grow to be a monster. In the summer of 2011, Zilius decided to turn our haven for the downtrodden and outcast into a shard of bitter steel. One of the saddest days of my life was when they moved in that crane. I called a community meeting and told everyone what was happening. The trenchers took the news hard. Most felt they would have to move on and find another place to call home, except me and Artie Dent. Artie was one of the strangest residents of the trench. He lay awake in the darkness many a night, muttering at the shadows around him. He was supposed to be on some medication for mental problems, but he thought that was a plot against him, so he rarely took it. Still, our policy of welcome applied to him as well. We all just gave him space. I thought he was harmless for the most part. At first, we all paid attention to Artie's speech at the community meeting that day, but he lost the room when at the climax of his speech he promised that he would ensure that the enemy's satellites never found us. People were used to Artie's promises, like when he claimed that he would bring the Secretary of the UN to speak with us, so people kind of tuned him out when he promised us that he would destroy the project from within. I was glad that Artie's cries for violence fell on deaf ears. I just decided that our only hope was to appeal to the public when Providence brought us a gift, Reese Dentner. Dentner was a reporter, and she was interested in us, both as people and as a community. Or so I thought at the time. I eventually realized that Reese was just using us for her own purposes. We did not have a leader, but I was primus inter pares, the first among equals, and I told Reese our tale. She promised to stop the construction if I gave her the exclusive scoop and enough time to collect the evidence she needed. I agreed, and so we were quiet. A month or so later, Reese told me she had managed to get me a sit-down with Zilius himself. I was very excited and worked for days on what I would say. However, when the big day came, instead of Zilius, I was struck with the site manager, Emerson Turnkin. When I suggested to him that they move the project to another blighted hole in the city, he exploded. Although neither I nor Turnkin knew it, Artie was in earshot the whole time. He knew the land around the trench better than anyone, and he had found some back way into the site. Before I could respond, he charged, bellowing curses and swinging some kind of construction shovel. Turnkin only escaped because I threw my body between them. My next plan was to stage a sit-in. Artie even talked about making it extra dramatic by killing himself on the site of the construction. This was crazy even for Artie, and none of us really took him seriously. Reese convinced me that a sit-in would only get us arrested. Instead, she convinced me to let Artie force him to negotiate in a less drastic way. I wasn't worried. For all of his huffing and puffing, Artie didn't have the tools or the concentration to do anything dangerous, and he wouldn't hurt anyone. So I watched as Artie did a bit of graffiti here and moved some tools over there. Artie called it Operation Turtle because it was meant to stop the construction and preserve the endangered trenchers. Since the crew could not find their tools and weren't sure what was where, they had to start each day repairing the damage. Construction on the site slowed to a crawl. One day in January, Zilius visited the site. After that, things really changed. A fence was put up to keep us out. Zilius was not about to let us in or anything else slow down the project. I watched as Turnkin, under Zilius's orders, cut the safety sweeps, and I watched as the workers turned their ankles, hurt their hands, and smashed their bodies. The second shift was even worse. By then, Turnkin was gone and Zilius ruled the night. I saw a person's foot get run over by a forklift, someone nearly electrocuted by live wires laying in puddles, and many other injuries. In March, I saw one person fall when a ladder slipped beneath her. She was carried off on a stretcher, unmoving, even as Zilius was ordering the next person in line to climb that same ladder. The trenchers faded away in ones and twos until only Artie and I remained. Artie would sit staring in the distance, turning over some kind of large wrench in his hand. When I asked him whether he had stolen it, he replied that it had trespassed on his land and was therefore his. I took that for a yes. I kept up my efforts to find the miracle that would save our home. On August 24th, Zilius' karmic debt came due. I found a letter in the trash from the city inspectors, and it said that the lift wasn't approved. I thought it would buy us another month or two, but I wasn't surprised when Zilius started preparing for the lift anyway. He had ignored the law before, and I knew he would do it again. He had sold his soul to the demon dollar. I will never forget August 31st. When I awakened and saw the rains and heard the howling winds, I knew there was no way they could lift in those conditions. I turned to celebrate with Artie, but he was nowhere to be found. I went looking for him, but only caught a glimpse of him later. At least I think it was him. I'm not sure, near the area where the big crane was perched. When I got nearer, he, or whoever it was in the trench coat, was gone. I watched the lift with a sense of doom. When the first lift took place, the panel was literally twisting in the wind and swinging back and forth, but they pushed on. Then, around 3 p.m., an angel came down from the manager's office. The government agent must have heard the screams from the crane because she immediately raised a red flag. Then, out of nowhere, Zilius emerged from the office and ran down towards the safety officer and started yelling at her. Zilius grabbed the green flag from the safety inspector's hand and waved it furiously in the direction of the lift operator. No sooner had Zilius retreated to the manager's office and closed the door than the strongest wind of the day tore through the job site. I watched, awestruck, as a massive crane began to crumble under its own weight. Panic ensued, and the workers were running in every direction. I was paralyzed by their screams. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Artie, his trench coat billowing in the wind, hands raised in terror, or defiance, or victory. That is how I will remember him. He was dead, and so was Zilius's dream. Later, I went through his meager belongings. I found this envelope addressed to Reese Dentner, of all people. In it, there was this bizarre manifesto thing. I guess he really meant to make a statement after all. Signed and sworn to before me this 12th day of December, 2012, London, Packard.